You are sitting inside the most powerful tank ever built. 70 tons of steel and firepower. An 88mm gun that can destroy any Allied tank from over 2 kilometers away. Armor so thick that enemy shells simply bounce off. You are driving a Königstiger, a King Tiger, the ultimate weapon of the Wehrmacht. Your commanders tell you that you are invincible. The enemy fears you. When Allied tankers see your massive silhouette on the horizon, they turn and run. You are supposed to feel safe inside this steel fortress, but you do not feel safe. Because you know something the propaganda does not tell you. You know that this magnificent machine is also a death trap. Not because the enemy can easily destroy it, but because it will destroy itself, because it will break down in the middle of a battle and leave you stranded, because it will run out of fuel miles behind enemy lines, because when something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong, you will have to abandon it. And when you abandon it, you become just another infantryman trying to survive in a war that Germany is losing. This is the real story of King Tiger crews in World War II. Not the legend of the superweapon, but the brutal reality of operating the most over-engineered, unreliable, fuel-hungry machine on the battlefield. Let me start with some numbers. Germany built only 492 King Tigers during the entire war. Compare that to the 50,000 Sherman tanks the Americans built, or the 84,000 T-34 tanks the Soviets produced. 492. That was all. And of those, most were lost not to enemy fire, but to mechanical breakdowns, fuel shortages, or abandonment by their own crews. The King Tiger was supposed to be the ultimate evolution of German tank design. It combined the heavy armor of the Tiger I with the sloped armor of the Panther. It weighed 70 tons, compared to 56 tons for the Tiger I. The main gun was the KWK-43, an 88mm cannon with a longer barrel that could penetrate 5 inches of armor at a range of 2 kilometers. No Allied tank could match that firepower. Sherman tanks had about 2 inches of frontal armor. T-34s had similar protection. Against a King Tiger, they did not stand a chance. The frontal armor was 6 inches thick and sloped. This made it effectively even thicker. Soviet tests after the war showed that even their largest tank gun, the 122mm, could barely penetrate the King Tiger from the front. The turret could traverse 360 degrees in 19 seconds, compared to 60 seconds. For the Tiger I, everything about it seemed better, stronger, more powerful, the perfect tank. But there was one massive problem. Actually, there were many problems, but the biggest one was the engine. The King Tiger used a Maybach HL 230 P30 engine that produced 690 horsepower. That sounds impressive. But remember, this engine was pushing 70 tons, the same engine that was used in the much lighter Panther and Tiger I tanks, which weighed 20 tons less. The result was a tank that was chronically underpowered. On roads, it could manage about 38 kilometers per hour. Off-road, it was lucky to reach 20 kilometers per hour. This made it slow, ponderous, easy to spot and target, especially from the air. And the fuel consumption was catastrophic. The King Tiger achieved about 2 miles per gallon on roads. Off-road, it was even worse. Compare that to the Sherman, which got about 2 gallons per mile, meaning it was far more fuel efficient. For a country that was already experiencing severe fuel shortages by 1944, this was a disaster. Most King Tigers were never destroyed in combat. They were abandoned by their crews because they ran out of fuel. General Patton, the famous American commander, saw this happening over and over. He called the King Tiger the world's best roadblock, because that is what they became. Massive, immobile obstacles sitting in the middle of roads, out of fuel, abandoned by their crews. But fuel was not the only problem. The mechanical reliability was terrible. The transmission and drivetrain were constantly breaking down. The steering mechanism was particularly prone to failure. The engine tended to overheat and cause consequential failure of the gearbox. The overlapping road wheel suspension, while providing a smooth ride, was a maintenance nightmare. During the Russian winter, mud would freeze between the wheels and had to be chipped away before the tank could move. In summer, the same mud would clog the suspension and cause the wheels to jam. When Schwere Heerespanzerabteilung 501 reached the battlefield, Only 8 of their 45 King Tigers were operational. Most losses were due to drivetrain failure. Think about that for a moment. A heavy tank battalion arriving for combat with less than 20% of its vehicles actually working. Not because of enemy action, because the tanks broke down on the way to the battle. The crews knew this. They knew that every time they climbed into a King Tiger, there was a good chance it would break down. And if it broke down in the wrong place at the wrong time, they were in serious trouble. Let me tell you what happened when a King Tiger broke down in combat. First, you had to try to repair it. But repairs were difficult. The Tiger's complex design made it tricky and expensive for mechanics to maintain. Track failures, engine fires, and broken gearboxes meant many Tigers broke down and had to be abandoned. Spare parts were often unavailable. The tank was so complicated that field repairs were nearly impossible. And you did not have time. The enemy was coming. One problem with both the Tiger I and Tiger II was that they were so big relative to other German tanks that the only vehicle that could tow a damaged Tiger was another Tiger. But if you were retreating, if your unit was falling back, there was no time to wait for recovery vehicles. You had to make a decision: destroy the tank so the enemy could not capture it, or leave it and hope you could come back for it later. Most crews chose to destroy it. They would set demolition charges, place them in the engine compartment and around the ammunition racks, then run. Sometimes they had time to detonate the charges. Sometimes, as happened near Onville-sur-Montsieu in August of 1944, the crew had to abandon the vehicle, and the 2 crewmen tasked with destroying the tank had to retreat before they could connect the detonators because U.S. soldiers appeared in large numbers. The tank was captured intact. As the German armies retreated in the east and west, many of these behemoths were abandoned or blown up by their own crews. Hundreds of King Tigers, each one representing thousands of hours of work and scarce resources, were left behind. Not destroyed by Allied guns, destroyed by their own mechanical unreliability and Germany's collapsing fuel supply. Let me describe what it was like to be a King Tiger crew in the last year of the war. You are assigned to a heavy tank battalion in Normandy in July of 1944. This is when the King Tiger made its combat debut. You and your crew spend weeks training on this massive machine, learning how to drive it without breaking the transmission, how to load the heavy shells, how to work together in the cramped fighting compartment. 5 men made up the crew: the commander in the turret directing operations, the gunner aiming that powerful 88mm gun, the loader hauling shells that weighed over 30 pounds each, the driver at the front left, trying to keep the beast moving without overtaxing the engine, and the radio operator at the front right, managing communications and firing the machine gun. You arrive at the front. The Allies have landed. They are pushing inland. Your battalion is ordered to counterattack. This is what the King Tiger was made for. You will smash through the Allied lines, destroy their tanks, save the situation. But then reality sets in. You are told to conserve fuel. Only move when absolutely necessary. Allied air superiority means you cannot move during the day. You have to wait until night, and even then, every kilometer you drive burns through precious fuel that cannot be replaced. You position yourself in ambush. This is where the King Tiger excels, sitting in a defensive position, waiting for enemy tanks to come into range, and when they do, you destroy them. On April 30th, 1945, King Tiger number 314, commanded by Georg Diers, destroyed 39 Soviet tanks during the Battle of Berlin in a single engagement. The gun was that powerful. The armor was that thick. In the right circumstances, a single King Tiger could stop an entire armored column. But those right circumstances were rare. More often, you were forced to move, to retreat, to reposition, and every time you moved, the risk increased. The engine would overheat, the transmission would strain, the fuel would run low, and you would pray that nothing broke. During testing, the Soviets found the cooling system was insufficient for hot conditions. The engine tended to overheat and cause failure of the gearbox. The right suspension of one tank had to be completely replaced, and its full functionality could not be re-established. The tank broke down around every 10 miles. 10 miles. Imagine being in combat knowing that your tank might break down after driving 10 miles. That is not a weapon. That is a liability. And then there was the armor quality. The welding of the King Tiger, even with the usual careful German workmanship, was significantly worse than on similar designs, even the Tiger one. This meant that when shells were unable to penetrate the armor, they caused the plates to break into smaller pieces, which would cause injury or death to the crew sitting inside. Spalling, they called it. Metal fragments breaking off the inside of the armor and flying around the crew compartment like shrapnel. You could survive a hit that did not penetrate the armor but still die from the metal shards tearing through your body. In August of 1944, three King Tigers attacked a Soviet bridgehead over the Vistula River near Baranov-Sandomierski. However, on the road to Oglendov, three Tiger IIs were destroyed in an ambush by a few T-34-85s. The German tanks suffered ammunition explosions, which caused many crew fatalities. This led to main gun ammunition no longer being stored in the turret to reduce fatal explosions. This became a pattern. The King Tiger was deadly when it could choose its position, when it could sit and wait and engage at long range. But when it was caught out of position, when it was moving, when it was surprised, it was vulnerable. The Soviet and Allied crews learned this. They learned to avoid frontal engagements, they learned to flank, they learned to target the sides and rear where the armor was thinner. They learned to use terrain and speed to their advantage. And they learned that if they just waited, the King Tiger would probably break down on its own. By the time the Tiger II made its combat debut in Normandy in July 1944, the necessities that Nazi Germany most lacked were trained, experienced tank crews, and fuel and logistics support. Many King Tiger crews had minimal training. Many crews had a mere fortnight to familiarize themselves with the Tiger before using it in combat. 2 weeks to learn how to operate the most complex tank in the world. 2 weeks to learn its quirks and weaknesses. It was not enough. Many Tigers were lost due to mechanical breakdowns or human error instead of enemy fire. Inexperienced drivers would overstress the engine, would drive too fast over rough terrain and break the suspension, would fail to perform proper maintenance and cause transmission failures. The tank was too complicated, too delicate for poorly trained crews to operate effectively. On the attack, advancing down narrow, icy roads as the Tiger II did during the Battle of the Bulge, big, heavy fuel-guzzling tanks could be a liability. The Ardennes offensive in December of 1944 was supposed to be Germany's great counterstrike. King Tigers led the assault. But the offensive petered out due to a lack of fuel, and many Tigers ended up being abandoned. The most powerful tanks in the world left behind like broken toys because there was no fuel to run them. Crew morale suffered. You were told you were driving an invincible superweapon, but you knew the truth. You knew that it would probably break down. You knew that even if it did not break down, you would run out of fuel. You knew that when that happened, you would have to abandon your tank and walk back to German lines. If you were lucky, if the enemy did not capture you first, the 103rd SS Heavy Panzer Battalion claimed approximately 500 kills in the period from January to April 1945 on the Eastern Front for the loss of 45 Tiger IIs, most of which were abandoned and destroyed by their own crews after mechanical breakdowns or for lack of fuel. 500 kills, 45 tanks lost. That sounds like an incredible kill-to-loss ratio. And it was, but those 45 tanks were not destroyed in heroic last stands. They were abandoned, left behind, blown up by their own crews. That is not the story of an invincible superweapon. That is the story of a flawed machine that looked impressive but could not be sustained in actual combat conditions. Some crews had better experiences. Some units had skilled mechanics who could keep the tanks running. Some battalions had access to adequate fuel supplies. The King Tiger's protection, together with the armor penetration and the effective firing range of its 88-centimeter KWK-43 gun, made it one of the best armored vehicles of World War II by kill-loss ratio, roughly 6-to-1. When everything worked, when the tank had fuel and ammunition and a skilled crew, it was devastating. But those conditions were increasingly rare. Germany was losing the war. Resources were scarce. Experienced crews were dying faster than they could be replaced. And the King Tiger, for all its power, could not change that reality. Throughout the war, the Tiger's greatest weakness was poor mechanical reliability. If preventive maintenance was not performed regularly, the transmission would soon fail due to the great weight of the machine. The result was a great number of Tigers abandoned and destroyed by their crews due to mechanical breakdown. This is why King Tiger crews called it a death trap. Not because the enemy could easily kill them, but because the tank itself was unreliable. Because it would betray them at the worst possible moment. Because they would be stuck, immobile, out of fuel, waiting for Allied aircraft or tanks to find them. Because when they had to abandon it, they became just ordinary soldiers trying to survive in a war that was already lost. The tank was prone to mechanical failures and fuel shortages, limiting its strategic effectiveness. That is the official, polite way to say it. The reality was harsher. The King Tiger was a magnificent achievement of engineering, but it was also impractical, unreliable, and ultimately a waste of resources that Germany desperately needed elsewhere. Some King Tigers survived the war. The only working example is displayed at the Musée des Blindés in Saumur, France. It is a combination of parts from several different tanks, painstakingly restored. The turret and engine are from King Tiger 300 of the 503rd Heavy Panzer Battalion, which saw intense action in the Vexin-Normand region between August 21st and August 28th, 1944. It participated in the Battle of Fontenay-Saint-Père and suffered a mechanical failure just outside the village of Oinville-sur-Montcient. The field repair of the left driving sprocket and track could not be performed, and the crew abandoned the vehicle. Even this restored museum piece, the last running King Tiger in the world, was originally abandoned due to mechanical failure. Not destroyed in glorious combat, just broken down and left behind. That tells you everything you need to know about the King Tiger's reliability. Heavy tanks like the King Tiger proved a dead end. After 1945, nations switched to building main battle tanks that had sufficient firepower and armor to breach enemy defenses, like heavy tanks, while being mobile enough to exploit breakthroughs. The lesson learned was clear. A tank that is too heavy, too slow, too fuel-hungry, and too unreliable is not a superweapon. It is a burden. The King Tiger crews knew this. They lived it. They experienced the frustration of breaking down in the middle of a battle, the fear of running out of fuel behind enemy lines, the humiliation of having to destroy their own tank because it could not be recovered. They called it a death trap not because they were cowards, but because they understood the reality that the propaganda ignored. Yes, the King Tiger could destroy any Allied tank. Yes, it had armor that could withstand almost any hit. Yes, in the right circumstances with a skilled crew, it was devastating. But those right circumstances were rare. And the wrong circumstances, the mechanical failures and fuel shortages and logistics breakdowns, were common. Too common. This was the real story of the King Tiger. Not the legend of the invincible superweapon, but the harsh reality of operating a magnificent but fatally flawed machine in the closing days of a lost war. The crews who operated them deserve respect. They did their duty under impossible conditions. But the tank itself, for all its power and protection, was ultimately a failure. A death trap, just as they said it was.